A cold-hearted millionaire watches from afar as a beggar girl tries to teach his wheelchair-bound daughter to walk in the mansion's garden. Furious, he approaches, but when he looks into the stranger girl's eyes, a chill runs down his spine. Something disturbing comes to light, challenging everything he believed. What happens next is simply unbelievable. The heavy silence of the Caldwell estate was broken only by the monotonous hum of Claire's wheelchair wheels against the marble floor. Helen, the housekeeper, pushed the 12-year-old girl through the empty corridors towards the garden as she did every morning, following a routine repeated for 2 years, ever since the accident that changed everything. The autumn sun bathed the impeccable flower beds, but Claire kept her gaze fixed on her own hands, pale and still on her lap. Her long brown hair fell like a curtain, hiding a face marked by sadness. Helen adjusted the blanket over the girl's legs, a mechanical gesture devoid of the warmth Claire craved. On the second floor in his office, Richard Caldwell watched the scene through the panoramic window as he always did. His tired eyes followed his daughter while his fingers drummed restlessly on the mahogany desk. The 50-year-old businessman carried the marks of grief and guilt that had consumed him since the death of his wife, Beatrice, in the same accident. That left Claire unable to move her legs. That morning's routine, however, would be different. An unusual movement near the back wall caught Helen's attention. A thin girl with worn clothes and disheveled hair skillfully climbed the vines. Before the housekeeper could shout, the intruder was already inside the property. "Hey, you! Get out of there!" Helen yelled, but her voice died when she saw something unexpected. Claire had lifted her head, and her eyes, usually so empty, now shone with curiosity. The trespassing girl, who couldn't have been more than 13, showed no fear. She approached, with light steps as if dancing, and smiled at Claire. "Hi, I'm Maya. Thought you might want some company," she said with disarming simplicity. Helen opened her mouth to protest, but Claire interrupted her with a whisper, the first sound she had made in weeks. Let her stay. In his office, Richard witnessed the scene with a mixture of apprehension and discomfort. His first impulse was to call security, but something stopped him. Perhaps it was the shy smile beginning to form on his daughter's lips, something he hadn't seen in so long. Maya sat on the grass near the wheelchair, completely ignoring Helen's disapproving stares. "Did you know I couldn't walk right when I was little either?" she commented, playing with a fallen flower. "But then I learned a secret." Claire leaned forward slightly, interested. Maya continued, "The secret is to never give up, even when everyone says you can't." The housekeeper remained tense, torn between her duty to protect Claire and her surprise at seeing the girl show interest in something for the first time in months. Richard, from his observation post, gripped the arm of his chair so tightly that his knuckles turned white. "Want to try?" Maya asked, holding out her hands to Claire. Helen took a step forward, alarmed, but Claire had already stretched out her own arms, trembling with an effort she hadn't made in a long time. Maya held Claire's hands with surprising gentleness for someone who seemed so wild. "Let's start slow. First, you have to believe you can." Richard stood up abruptly, knocking over some papers. His heart pounded as he watched the scene. The last time he had seen someone hold Claire's hands like that had been Beatrice, moments before the accident. The memory suffocated him. "That's it, very good," Maya's cheerful voice echoed through the garden. Claire had managed to move her fingers slightly, something the doctors had said was unlikely. "See? You're stronger than you think." Helen brought her hands to her mouth, stifling a sob. In his office, Richard staggered to the window, pressing his forehead against the cold glass. Claire's smile, though small, felt like a knife twisting in his chest. How had that ragged girl achieved in minutes what teams of specialists hadn't? Managed in 2 years? But then the moment was shattered by a distant shout. "Maya, Maya, where'd you get to?" It was a man's voice, harsh and threatening. The smile vanished from the girl's face, replaced by an expression of pure terror. "I have to go," she murmured, gently releasing Claire's hands. "I'll come back tomorrow, I promise." Before anyone could react, Maya had disappeared the same way. She came, leaving behind a transformed Claire and a whirlwind of unanswered questions. The light in the wealthy girl's eyes began to fade again as her new friend vanished into the distance. That night, the Caldwell estate seemed even gloomier. Richard remained in his office late, the little intruder's words echoing in his mind. The businessman examined the photograph on his desk for the 100th time. Beatrice smiled, radiant, while Claire, then 10 years old, blew out the candles on her birthday cake. That had been the last picture of the two together. In Claire's room, Helen tried unsuccessfully to get the girl to sleep. For the first time in months, Claire resisted the routine. Her eyes, fixed on the window, searched for any sign of Maya in the dark garden. "She'll be back tomorrow," Claire whispered, more to herself than to the housekeeper. Helen sighed, adjusting the pillows. "Honey, don't get your hopes up. That girl, she's not like us. Must have a troubled family the way she ran off. It's best to forget her." The housekeeper's harsh words provoked something not seen in a long time. A reaction from Claire. The girl turned her face to the opposite side, and a silent tear rolled down her cheek. Helen felt her heart ache, but remained firm. After the accident, she had transformed into a fortress of rigidity, convinced it was the only way to protect Claire. Downstairs, Joe, the gardener, was finishing his shift when he noticed movement in the bushes. He approached cautiously and found Maya huddled, shivering with cold. Her thin arms were marked with recent bruises. "My God, girl, what happened?" "And to you?" he asked, taking off his jacket to cover her. Maya shrank back further. "Please don't tell anyone I'm here. He can't find me." Her voice was just a frightened whisper. Joe looked around, torn. He knew he should inform Helen or Mr. Caldwell, but something in the girl's terrified eyes stopped him. "Come with me," he said finally. "I have a place where you can spend the night." In the small tool shed, Joe improvised a bed with empty sacks and old blankets. As Maya settled down, he noticed old scars on her wrists. "Who did this to you?" "My uncle," she replied after a long silence. "Since my mom disappeared, he says I'm a burden, that nobody wants me." Her words came out choked by contained sobs. On the second floor, Richard was walking down the hall when he heard a noise coming from Claire's room. He approached the slightly ajar door silently and saw something that froze him. His daughter was trying, with tremendous effort, to move her legs off the bed. "I can't give up," she murmured, repeating Maya's words. "I can't give up." Richard gripped the doorknob tightly, fighting the urge to enter. Since the accident, he could barely look at his daughter without being consumed by guilt. If he hadn't insisted on driving that rainy night, if he had listened to Beatrice when she suggested postponing the trip. A groan of pain brought Richard back to the present. Claire had fallen off the bed, but was still trying to drag herself towards the wheelchair. The businessman took a step forward, then retreated. His hands trembled. Finally, he did the only thing he knew how to do. He called Helen. The housekeeper appeared quickly and found Claire on the floor. "For heaven's sake, what are you doing?" Her voice sounded harsher than intended, masking the fear she felt. "I want to be strong," Claire replied between tears of frustration, "like she said I could be." In the shed, Maya was also crying, but silently. Joe had brought her a sandwich and water, promising to return in the morning. Alone in the darkness, The girl pulled a small, crumpled newspaper clipping from her torn pocket. In the faded photo, a woman smiled, the same one who appeared in her nightmares every night. "Mom," Maya whispered, stroking the image. "Why did you disappear? Why? Did you leave me with him?" The night wore on, and 4 lonely souls remained awake on the Caldwell property. Claire, determined to regain control of her body. Richard, tormented by ghosts of the past. Helen, torn between duty and compassion. And Maya, a child forced to grow up too fast, carrying scars that went far beyond the marks on her skin. On the horizon, dark clouds gathered, foreshadowing a storm. The same kind of storm that 2 years earlier had forever changed the lives of the Caldwells. And now, once again, fate was preparing a twist that none of them could predict. The storm broke over the mansion in the early hours of the morning. In the tool shed, Maya woke with a start at the sound of thunder. The tin roof amplified each drop of rain, turning them into a deafening drumbeat. Huddled in her corner, the girl hugged her knees to her chest, trying to protect herself not only from the cold, but also from the memories that haunted her. In her room, Claire was also awake. Storms always brought back memories of that fateful night. The screech of brakes, her mother's scream, the violent impact. Her hands gripped the sheets tightly as a particularly loud thunderclap shook the windows. It was then that she heard it. A muffled cry coming from the garden. Helen, sleeping in the next room, heard it too. She hastily put on her robe and ran to check on Claire, finding her agitated in bed. "There's someone out there," the girl said, with an urgency in her voice the housekeeper hadn't heard in years. In the shed, Maya trembled uncontrollably. Rain had found gaps in the roof, and now icy drips fell on her. But it wasn't just the cold making her shiver. In the darkness, every shadow seemed to take the shape of her uncle. Every noise sounded like his heavy footsteps approaching. Joe arrived at the shed drenched, carrying a flashlight and a broken umbrella. He found Maya in a state of panic, muttering disconnected words. "He's going to find me. He always finds me." The gardener tried to calm her, but the girl was trapped in her traumatic memories. Between sobs, words escaped. "Mommy, please don't leave me. He's hurting me so bad." On the second floor of the mansion, Richard paced his room, unable to sleep. The thunder transported him back to that night, to the moment he lost control of the car. Beatrice's face, seconds before impact, still haunted him. "Forgive me," he murmured into the void. "Forgive me for not listening to you." Helen decided to do a round of the house, more to calm Claire than out of real necessity. As she passed the hallway window, her flashlight caught movement in the garden. She approached the glass and saw Joe running in the rain, carrying something or someone in his arms. "Mr. Caldwell," Helen shouted, momentarily forgetting all her composure. "Something's happening in the garden." Richard hurried out of his room, still wearing his silk robe. Together, he and Helen descended the stairs just as Joe entered through the back door, carrying an unconscious and feverish Maya. "For heaven's sake, what is this girl still doing here?" Helen exclaimed, but her voice betrayed more concern than anger. "She's burning up," Joe replied, his voice trembling. "And there are marks, lots of marks. Someone's been hurting this child." Richard observed the scene with a mixture of horror and recognition. The marks on Maya's arms were similar to those Claire had suffered in the accident, scars of someone who fought to survive. "Take her to the guest room," he ordered, surprising everyone, including himself. "Helen, call Dr. Evans, now!" Upstairs, Claire heard the commotion. Using all her strength, she dragged herself to the wheelchair. Her legs protested with sharp pains, but she ignored them. With difficulty, she managed to sit up and headed for the door. When she reached the hallway, she saw Joe carrying Maya into the room next to hers. The street girl was delirious, calling for her mother between pained moans. Claire felt her heart clench. For the first time since the accident, her own pain seemed smaller in the face of someone else's suffering. Helen returned minutes later, breathless. "The doctor is on his way," she announced. Then she noticed Claire in the hallway. "Honey, you shouldn't be out here." "I want to help," Claire replied, with a firmness that surprised everyone. "She helped me yesterday. Now it's my turn." Richard, standing in the doorway, felt something break inside him. It was the same tone of voice Beatrice used when she was determined to do what she thought was right. For the first time in 2 years, he truly looked at his daughter and saw not just the tragedy of the past, but also the strength that had always been there. Dr. Evans arrived at the mansion around 4 in the morning, his stout figure soaked by the relentless rain. As he examined Maya, his usually cheerful face hardened. The marks on the girl's body told a story he knew all too well after 20 years in practice. "These injuries aren't recent," he said, pointing to old scars on Maya's back. "Some are months old, others look like years. This is..." He hesitated, searching for the right words in front of Claire, who refused to leave the room. "This is the result of systematic abuse." Richard, leaning against the farthest wall of the room, clenched his fists. An old, painful memory surfaced. Beatrice, years ago, insisting they start a foundation to support child victims of violence. He had refused, arguing it was better to stay focused on business. Now, remorse choked him. Maya tossed deliriously in bed, her skin burning with fever. Between disconnected murmurs, one name was repeated. "Anna, Anna, don't leave me." Helen, administering the fever reducer prescribed by the doctor, felt her defenses begin to crumble. The rigidity she had cultivated for years like armor seemed inadequate in the face of so much suffering. Her hands, always so steady, trembled slightly as she brushed the sweat-soaked hair from the girl's face. "We need to notify the authorities," Dr. Evans said, but his voice was cut off by Claire's sharp cry. "No, they'll take her away. They'll send her back to the person who did this." The girl's words echoed through the room, charged with an emotion she hadn't shown in a long time. Richard approached his daughter, trying to calm her, but Claire pulled away sharply, making the wheelchair bang against the wall. "You've never cared about anyone but work. Not even me after the accident. Are you going to let them take her away, too?" The blow hit Richard like a punch to the gut. Every word Claire spoke was a truth he had tried to ignore. Since Beatrice's death, he had buried himself in work, leaving his daughter in Helen's care, as if distance could lessen his guilt. Joe, watching everything from the doorway, finally spoke. "She has a mother. Maya showed me a newspaper clipping last night. The mother disappeared a few months ago." "Anna," Maya murmured, as if responding to the comment. "Hospital, blood, he wouldn't let me go." Dr. Evans frowned. "St. Luke's Hospital. We had a case about 6 months ago. A woman admitted with severe injuries, but she disappeared before filing a report." Richard ran a hand through his graying hair, a gesture Beatrice always said meant he was about to make an important decision. "Dr. Evans, I need your discretion. Give me a few days to investigate this situation." "Richard," Helen intervened, using her employer's first name for the first time in years. "This is risky. If something happens..." "It's already happened," Claire cried out again, tears streaming down her face. "It happens to her every day. It happened to me and Mom, and everyone always pretends not to see." The silence that followed was deafening. Maya stirred in the bed, her eyes fluttering open slightly. "It hurts," she whispered, her voice small and scared. "It hurts so much." Claire immediately took her friend's hand. "I know it hurts me too, but you taught me we can't give up, remember?" Helen brought her hands to her face, trying to hide the tears that finally broke through her resistance. Joe hugged his arms, as if feeling cold, though the room was warm. Dr. Evans looked out the window, his silhouette framed by occasional lightning flashes. Richard watched the scene with painful clarity. Claire was right. He had hidden for too long. Beatrice would never forgive him if she knew how he had handled everything after her death. And now, another child was suffering, and he had the power to do something about it. 72 hours, he said finally. Give me 72 hours, Doctor. If we haven't found out what happened to her mother by then, you can take whatever action you deem necessary. The doctor nodded gravely, but his eyes conveyed a clear message. Time was running out, and some wounds couldn't wait much longer to be treated. Dawn brought a deceptive calm to the Caldwell estate. The storm had passed, but it left a trail of dead leaves across the garden and a quiet weight inside the house. Maya finally slept, her fever gradually lowering under the effect of the medication. Claire had refused to leave her friend's room, falling asleep in her wheelchair with her fingers still intertwined with Maya's. Richard hadn't slept. In his office, he examined the newspaper clipping Joe had found with Maya. The photograph showed a woman in her early 30s, Anna Miller, an employee at a downtown laundromat. The article, small and buried, mentioned her disappearance after being admitted to St. Luke's Hospital. "Sir?" Helen called softly from the door. Her deep, dark circles revealed a sleepless night. "Breakfast is served, but—" She hesitated. "Claire doesn't want to leave Maya's room." Richard nodded distractedly, his eyes fixed on the photograph. Anna had the same gentle smile as Maya, the same determined gaze. How had that woman simply vanished? And why had her daughter ended up in the hands of a violent man? In the guest room, Maya woke with a start. For a moment, panic seized her as she didn't recognize her surroundings. Then she felt the soft touch of Claire's hand, and the memories of the previous night washed over her. "It's okay," Claire whispered, sensing the fear in her friend's eyes. "You're safe here." Maya tried to smile, but a sharp pain in her ribs made her wince. Her uncle's words echoed in her mind. "Your mother abandoned you because you're a burden. Nobody else will ever want you." Helen entered the room carrying a tray with oatmeal and tea. Her usually stern face softened as she saw the two girls. She remembered her own childhood, the scars she also carried, the same cruel words she had heard from her father. Perhaps that was why she had built so many walls around herself. "You need to eat," she said, her voice gentler than usual. As she helped Maya sit up, she noticed more marks on her neck, partially hidden by her hair. Her stomach churned. In the office, Richard made calls. His secretary, surprised by her boss's unusual requests, searched for admission records at St. Luke's Hospital. With each new detail uncovered, the puzzle grew darker. Anna Miller had been admitted to the ER with multiple fractures and internal bleeding. The chart, accessed through Richard's influence, indicated a domestic accident, but the attending nurse's notes suggested another story. That same night, a man had tried to remove her from the hospital by force, causing a disturbance. By the time police arrived, both had disappeared. Joe tended the garden with mechanical movements, his mind elsewhere. As the gardener, he knew every corner of the property. He knew the places where Maya could hide if her uncle found her, but he also knew he couldn't protect her forever. Claire watched Maya eat the oatmeal with difficulty. Every movement seemed to cause pain. "When I got hurt," she began hesitantly, "I thought I'd never be happy again. That the pain would never go away." Maya lowered her spoon, silent tears streaming down her face. "Sometimes," she whispered, "I close my eyes and pretend I'm with my mom again, that none of this happened, that she never—" Her voice broke. Claire squeezed her hand tighter. "I pretend sometimes too. Pretend I can run, that my mom is still here. But then you showed up and I didn't have to pretend I could be strong anymore." In the hallway, Helen listened to the conversation, her heart tight. How many times had she pretended? Pretended she didn't care, that her stiffness was just professionalism, that she didn't see Claire wilting day after day like a flower without sun. Richard came down the stairs with heavy steps. The morning's discoveries had aged his face by years. As he passed the guest room, he heard the girl's soft crying. The sound was like knives in his chest. 72 hours, he murmured to himself. 72 hours to fix not only Maya's life, but also all the lives he had allowed to break under his roof. The clock on the wall marked each second with cruel precision, reminding him that time, once again, was not on his side. The afternoon dragged on slowly at the Caldwell estate. Maya had managed to take a bath with Helen's help, who had to fight back tears upon seeing the extent of the injuries on the girl's body. Now, dressed in pajamas borrowed from Claire, Maya seemed even smaller and more fragile. "We need to cut this hair," Helen said, trying to untangle the knots in Maya's dark hair. "It's in terrible shape." Maya flinched at the touch of the brush, an automatic reflex of someone used to expecting pain. "My mom used to cut it," she murmured. "She always said I had hair just like hers when she was little." In the bed beside her, Claire watched the scene with a lump in her throat. Her own memories of moments with her mother seemed more vivid now. Beatrice used to comb her hair every night too, humming softly. The phone rang in Richard's office, breaking the house's silence. It was his secretary, Mr. Caldwell. Her voice sounded tense. "I found something about Anna Miller. She had filed a domestic violence complaint against her brother, but withdrew it a week before she disappeared." Richard felt his blood run cold. "The brother's name? Robert Miller. He has an extensive criminal record, mostly for assault. Works as a security guard for a transport company." In the garden, Joe was gathering the last fallen leaves when he noticed strange movement near the wall. A man was watching the property, his face partially hidden by a worn cap. The gardener felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Helen was finishing cutting Maya's hair when the girl began to tremble inexplicably. "He's close," she whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "I can feel it. He always finds me." Claire reached out to her friend, but before she could touch her, the sound of breaking glass echoed through the house. Maya let out a muffled cry and huddled in the corner of the room. Richard ran up the stairs, finding Helen standing in the hallway with scissors still in her hand. "Someone threw a rock through the living room window," the housekeeper said, her voice betraying the fear she tried to hide. "He wants to take me back," Maya sobbed, hugging her knees. "He'll hurt everyone like he hurt my mom." Claire, in a surge of courage, maneuvered her chair to stand between Maya and the door. "I won't let him," she declared, her voice trembling but determined. "I won't let anyone hurt you again." Richard watched his daughter with a mixture of pride and terror. It was the same determination he had seen in Beatrice so many times. But now that courage could put Claire in danger. "Helen, lock the doors. Joe," he called out the window. The gardener ran inside. "Did you see anyone?" "A man, sir, tall, strong, was watching the house." Maya began to hyperventilate. "Uncle Rob," she whispered. "He found out. He always finds out." Helen instinctively hugged the girl, surprising herself with the gesture. The smell of shampoo in Maya's freshly cut hair reminded her of her own daughter, lost 15 years ago to an illness no money could cure. Maybe that's why she had been so hard on Claire, the fear of getting attached and losing again. "We need to call the police," Joe said, but Richard shook his head. "Not yet. If he's really responsible for his sister's disappearance, we can't risk Maya ending up in foster care, or worse, back in his custody." "But sir," Helen protested, "if he's watching us." A new noise, this time closer, made everyone jump. Heavy footsteps in the back garden. "He won't leave," Maya cried. "He never leaves. He said if I told anyone the same thing that happened to my mum would happen to me." Claire held her friend's hand tightly. "But you're not alone this time," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I won't leave you alone ever again." Richard looked at the two girls and made a decision. He picked up the phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. "Charles, I need help. Remember that favor you owe me from college? Time to collect." Night fell over the mansion like a suffocating blanket. Richard had gathered everyone in, the second-floor office, the curtains drawn and the lights dimmed. Maya remained huddled in a corner of the leather sofa while Claire held her hand, refusing to leave her even for a second. "Charles will be here in an hour," Richard informed them, his voice low and tense. "He's a private investigator. If anyone can find out what happened to your mother, Maya, it's him." Helen served tea to everyone with trembling hands, the occasional sounds from the garden making her jump. Joe stood guard near the window, a garden spade held firmly in his calloused hands. "He won't give up," Maya murmured, her voice almost inaudible. "Once, I tried to run away to a teacher's house who found out about the bruises. That same night, Uncle Rob broke all her windows. The teacher moved out of town the following week." Claire felt a shiver run down her spine. Unconsciously, her free hand moved to her paralyzed legs, remembering her own prison. "But this time is different," she said, trying to sound braver than she felt. "This time you have us." A sudden crash on the first floor made everyone freeze. The sound of shattering glass was followed by heavy footsteps. "He's inside," Helen whispered, her face pale as paper. Years of discipline and composure crumbled in seconds. "I know she's in there," a deep, slurred voice echoed through the house. "Maya, get down here now, you ungrateful brat. Or do you want everyone here ending up like your mother?" Maya began to tremble violently, silent tears streaming down her face. "He killed her," she whispered between sobs. "I saw him that night at the hospital. He... Richard acted quickly, shoving a heavy metal file cabinet against the office door. Joe positioned himself beside him, still holding the spade. Helen hugged the two girls, trying to shield them with her own body. The footsteps approached the stairs. "You hear me up there? Stuck-up rich guy, think you can steal what's mine? Maya's my responsibility. My sister left her to me." "Liar!" Maya suddenly shouted, her voice filled with old pain. "Mom would never..." "Leave me with you. You hurt her. You hurt her until she couldn't scream anymore." The silence that followed was deafening. Then a grotesque laugh echoed through the house. "So you saw, huh? Always knew you saw. That's why you've been so quiet all these months. But there's no turning back now, is there? You opened that dirty mouth." Claire squeezed Maya's hand tighter. Her heart was beating so hard it felt like it would explode. For the first time since the accident, she desperately wished she could run, could do something more than hold her friend's hand. Richard picked up his cell phone, but there was no signal. "He must have cut the landline too," he muttered, frustration evident in his voice. The footsteps were now in the hallway. "Last chance, Maya, or I'm coming in to get you. And you know what happens to rich, meddling people who stick their noses where they don't belong." Helen looked at the girls, then at Richard. A decision formed in her eyes. "Sir," she whispered, "there's an old service passage behind that bookshelf, leads to the garage. The staff used it before the renovation." Richard's eyes widened, understanding the plan. The passage had been sealed for years, but it was still large enough for the girls to pass through. A violent bang on the door made the file cabinet tremble. Joe tightened his grip on the spade, sweat dripping down his forehead. "Quick," whispered Helen, already moving the bookshelf with Richard's help. "Joe and I will distract him. You take the girls." "Helen!" Richard began, but the housekeeper cut him off. "I've already lost one daughter, sir. I won't lose another. Not this time." Another impact on the door, stronger. The cabinet began to give way. Maya looked at Helen, then at Claire. In the dim office, two girls wounded by life found themselves once again united by fear and hope. Time was running out, and the choices they made in the next few minutes would change their lives forever. The noise of the door being forced echoed through the office as Richard desperately tried to maneuver Claire's wheelchair through the narrow passage. Years of accumulated dust made the girls cough, but no one dared make any louder sound. "I can't leave you," Claire whispered, grabbing Helen's hand. The housekeeper had tears in her eyes, but her face showed fierce determination. "Yes, you can, my love," Helen replied, kissing the girl's forehead. "You have, in two. Please take care of each other." Maya trembled so much she could barely stand. Joe held her by the shoulders, his kind eyes meeting hers. "Remember what you told me in the garden, that you wanted to be strong like the flowers growing in the cracks in the wall. Now's the time." A louder crash sent the file cabinet toppling over. The office door splintered dangerously. "Go!" Helen hissed, pushing the girls and Richard into the passage. "Close it behind you!" Richard hesitated for a moment, looking at his two employees, no, his two friends, who were about to face a violent man to protect his family. "Helen, Joe, protect the girls," Helen cut in, her voice firm. "It's what Beatrice would have wanted." The door burst inward just as the bookshelf slid back into place, concealing the secret passage. Robert Miller stormed into the office like a tempest, his bloodshot eyes scanning the room. In the dark passage, Richard guided Claire's chair with difficulty, while Maya followed close behind, her small hands gripping the chair. The tunnel was narrow and suffocating, the air heavy with decades of neglect. "Where is she?" Robert's voice pierced the walls. "Where did you hide the girl?" "There's no one here but us," Helen replied, her voice surprisingly calm. "You're trespassing on private property." A sound of something being knocked over, followed by an angry shout. "Don't lie to me. I saw her through the window. That little murderer." "Murderer?" Joe's voice sounded incredulous. "The only person dead in this story was her mother, and we all know who's responsible." In the passage, Maya choked back a sob. Claire reached back in the darkness, finding her friend's icy fingers. "Careful," Richard whispered, guiding them around a bend. The path sloped gently downward, the air growing colder. "We're almost at the garage." Above them, the argument continued. "You don't have proof of anything," Robert snarled. "Anna had an accident. I tried to help, but she ran away from the hospital. It's her fault if..." "If what?" Helen's voice carried years of contained pain. "If she died, like my daughter died, some deaths aren't accidents, Mr. Miller. They're murders." A dull thud, followed by a muffled cry. Maya's heart stopped for a second. "No," Claire whispered, trying to turn the chair. Richard held her firm. "We can't go back," he said, his voice choked. "They're buying us time. We can't waste their sacrifice." The passage ended at a rusty metal door. Richard pushed it open with his shoulder, revealing the dark garage. His car was there, keys still in the ignition from when he'd arrived earlier. "Quick," he murmured, helping Claire out of the chair and into the back seat. Maya scrambled in, right after hugging her friend. The sound of breaking glass echoed from upstairs, followed by a scream that chilled everyone's blood. "Maya, I'm gonna find you, even if I have to burn this whole house down." Richard started the car just as smoke began to drift down the passage. The smell of burning filled the garage. "No," Maya whimpered. "He's going to hurt them like he hurt my mom. It's my fault, always my fault." Claire held her tighter. "It's not your fault. It was never your fault." Richard glanced in the rearview mirror at the two girls huddled in the back seat. Upstairs, the people who cared most about his daughter besides Beatrice were facing a monster. And now, smoke began to rise into the night, turning his home into an inferno. The automatic garage door opened slowly. seeming to move in slow motion. On the street, sirens began to wail in the distance, but would it be enough time? Were Helen and Joe still... "Dad!" Claire's voice cut through his thoughts. It was the first time in 2 years she had called him that. "We can't abandon them." Richard stared intently at the mansion, now with smoke billowing from the second-floor windows. The car was running, ready to leave, but he couldn't move. Claire's words echoed in his mind, bringing back the night of the accident, the night he chose to run from the pain, abandoning his daughter when she needed him most. "Call 911, he said, handing the cell phone to Claire. Then, to the girl's surprise, he got out of the car. "Dad!" Claire cried, fear evident in her voice. "What are you going to do?" "What I should have done 2 years ago. Stop running." His face was transformed, years of guilt and cowardice giving way to fierce determination. "Lock the doors. Don't get out of the car for anything." Maya grabbed his arm before he could walk away. "He'll hurt you," she whispered, her large eyes filled with terror, "like he hurt everyone who tried to help me." Richard held the girl's small, trembling hand. "Sometimes," he said, his voice soft, "we have to face our monsters to stop them from hurting more people." As he ran back towards the mansion, sounds of a struggle came from the second floor. The smoke grew thicker with every second. Richard found the kitchen door, broken down, and entered, the heat from the spreading fire already palpable. In the car, Claire held Maya while talking to the 911 operator. Her useless legs had never felt like such a heavy burden. "Please," she murmured, "don't take anyone else from me." Inside the mansion, Richard took the stairs 2 at a time, his heart pounding like a drum in his chest. In the second-floor hallway, he found Joe slumped near the office door, a cut on his forehead, bleeding. "Helen," the gardener murmured, trying to get up. He pushed her. When she tried to stop, the fire. Richard helped Joe lean against the wall. From the office came sounds of furniture breaking and Robert's drunken voice shouting threats. "Where's Helen?" Richard asked, coughing from the smoke. "Music room," Joe replied, pointing down the hall. She managed to distract him, but Richard didn't wait for him to finish. He ran to the music room, finding Helen semi-conscious near the piano. The instrument Beatrice had loved so much now witnessed another tragedy. "Leave me here," Helen murmured when he tried to lift her. "Save the girls." "No more leaving people." "Behind," Richard answered, his voice choked. "No more running." A crash came from the office, followed by a laugh that seemed to come from hell itself. "Found it!" Robert shouted. "The passage! You won't hide her from me!" Richard helped Helen up, supporting her on his shoulder. The fire now blocked the main staircase, but there was a service stairwell at the end of the hall. If they could just reach it. "Richard Caldwell," Robert's voice thundered behind them. "Where do you think you're going with my property?" Richard turned slowly, still holding Helen. Robert Miller was even larger than he'd imagined, his eyes glowing with a sick fury through the smoke. In his hand, a flaming piece of wood. "Maya isn't anyone's property," Richard replied, his voice steady despite the fear. "Just like Anna wasn't." Robert's face twisted into a mask of hatred. "Anna was my sister, mine. She was going to abandon me, take Maya, after everything I did for them. What you did was destroy 2 lives, Helen said, her voice weak but laced with contempt. "Just like you destroyed your own sister's life." "Shut up," Robert roared, advancing with the burning piece of wood. "You don't know anything. I'll finish all of you, just like I finished her." At that moment, the sound of sirens filled the air. Police cars and fire trucks surrounded the mansion. An amplified voice called out from outside. "Robert Miller, the house is surrounded. We have witnesses to the homicide of Anna Miller. Surrender now." The man's face paled. For the first time, fear replaced the fury in his eyes. But then, a demonic smile spread across his lips. "If I'm going down," he said, raising the flaming wood, "you're coming with me." The world seemed to slow down as Robert lunged with the flaming wood. Richard shoved Helen aside, feeling the heat sear past his face. The smell of burning hair filled his nostrils as he staggered back. In the car, Claire and Maya watched in horror as flames now consumed the second floor of the mansion. Maya trembled uncontrollably, muttering disconnected words. "My fault, always my fault." "No," Claire hugged her tighter. "It's his fault. It was always his fault." Her words were firm, but tears streamed down her face as she watched her father disappear into the burning house. Inside the mansion, Joe gathered his last strength and, though injured, tackled Robert from behind. The man roared with rage, thrashing like a wild animal. The flaming wood fell, spreading more fire across the hallway. "Helen!" Richard yelled. "The service stairs! Now!" The housekeeper began to drag herself towards the stairs, while Richard tried to help Joe. Robert, however, was too strong. With a violent move, he threw the gardener against the wall. "You don't understand," he screamed, his voice distorted by rage and smoke. "Anna was my responsibility. She couldn't just leave. She couldn't leave me alone." "Like you left her alone that night at the hospital," Richard taunted, trying to buy time as Helen reached the stairs. "Or did you stay there?" Robert stayed to make sure she wouldn't survive to tell the truth. Robert's face contorted into a demonic expression. "She chose that, tried to run off with Maya, even after everything I did for them. His voice broke for a moment. "I just wanted her to understand she needed me." A deafening crash cut through. The air as part of the ceiling collapsed, blocking the path to the main stairs. The smoke grew thicker with every second. In the car, Maya suddenly went rigid. "Claire," she whispered, her eyes wide, "remember what you told me? That sometimes we have to be strong even when everyone says we can't?" Claire felt her heart clench. "Maya, no!" But the girl was already opening the car door. "I can't let anyone else die because of me." In the burning hallway, Robert advanced towards Richard, who had placed himself between the attacker and the service stairs, where Helen was trying to help Joe stand. "You know what's funny?" Robert snarled, picking up another piece of wood from the floor. "At the hospital, Anna tried to protect Maya too, right up to the last moment she tried, but in the end, everyone gives up." "Liar!" The childish voice cut through the air like a knife. Everyone turned to see Maya standing at the beginning of the hallway, her small hands clenched into fists. "Maya, no!" Helen screamed, her face contorted in horror. Robert smiled, a sick smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Finally decided to stop. Hiding, little princess, come to watch everyone die because of you, just like your mother." "Mom didn't die because of me," Maya replied, her voice trembling but firm. "She died because you're a monster, and I saw everything. I saw you hit her until she didn't move anymore. I saw you drag her out of the hospital, and I saw where you buried her." The smile vanished from Robert's face. You can't prove anything." "Yes, I can," Maya replied, tears streaming down her soot-streaked face. "Because I went back there. Every night I went back. And one of those nights..." She reached into the pocket of the borrowed pajamas, pulling out something small and shiny. "I found this." The gold chain with a small cross stained with dried blood glinted in the flames. Robert turned pale. "Mommy's necklace," Maya whispered. "The one Grandma gave her, the one you ripped off her that night." At that moment, a powerful stream of water shot through the broken window, hitting Robert full force and slamming him against the wall. The firefighters had finally arrived. "Maya!" Claire's voice echoed from the end of the hallway. Somehow, the girl had dragged herself from the car, leaving her wheelchair behind. "Please, come back!" The fire roared around them, consuming the memories of two shattered families. And in the midst of the flames, a small, broken girl finally confronted her tormentor, as past and present merged in a devastating moment of truth. The blast of water had knocked Robert down, but the man scrambled up quickly, water streaming down his hate-twisted face. Flames licked the walls around them, the heat almost unbearable. "You little traitor!" he roared, advancing towards Maya. "It was our secret, ours!" Richard tried to intercept him, but slipped on the wet floor. Helen screamed. Joe tried to rise, but his legs wouldn't obey. Claire, still on the floor where she had dragged herself, reached out desperately towards her friend. But Maya didn't back down. Her small hands clutched the blood-stained necklace so tightly her knuckles were white. "No," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "It wasn't a secret. It was a lie, like all your lies." Another stream of water shot through the window, but Robert dodged it. The fire roared around them, consuming furniture, paintings, memories. The smoke was so thick they could barely see each other. "Lies?" Robert laughed, a grotesque, hysterical sound. "I took care of you, gave you a roof, food. Your mother was weak, couldn't take care of herself." "Mom wasn't weak," Maya cried, tears cutting paths through her soot-stained face. "She worked 2 jobs. She was saving money for us to get away from you." A deafening crash split the air as part of the ceiling collapsed between them. Richard seized the distraction to pull Claire closer, shielding her from the flaming debris. "Maya!" Claire called, coughing from the smoke. "Please, come here!" But Maya remained where she was, facing the man who had destroyed her life. "You killed her," she continued, her voice laden with a pain far too old for her years, "because she had finally done it. She'd found a place for us to live, far away. From you," Robert roared again, a sound more animal than human. "She was my sister. She had to stay with me. We were family." "Family doesn't hurt," Maya screamed back. "Family doesn't break arms, doesn't kick you until you pass out. Family doesn't—" Her voice broke, more tears falling. "Family doesn't kill." Helen finally managed to stand, helping Joe lean on her. "The firefighters," she whispered. "They're almost here. We just need—" But Robert wasn't listening anymore. His eyes, reflecting the surrounding flames, fixed on the necklace in Maya's hand. With a sudden movement, he lunged. "Maya!" Claire screamed, her body moving on pure instinct. And then something impossible happened. Her legs, those same legs the doctors said would never respond again, contracted. With an impulse born of desperation and love, Claire managed to drag herself forward, grabbing the cuff of Robert's pants. The man stumbled, losing his balance. At the same instant, a fresh blast of water from the firefighters hit him. Robert staggered backward towards the section of the hallway where the floor was giving way. "No!" Maya cried, her hatred momentarily replaced by horror as she saw her uncle teeter dangerously close to the flaming hole. Richard lunged forward, trying to reach him, not because Robert deserved saving, but because he knew that Maya, sweet, broken, brave Maya, couldn't bear having another death on her conscience. But it was too late. With a final look of fury and disbelief, Robert Miller disappeared through the burning floor, taking the weight of his crimes with him. "No!" Maya's scream echoed through the burning hallway. It wasn't a cry of grief for her uncle, but one of horror at witnessing yet another life lost, even if it was the life of her tormentor. Claire finally reached her, pulling her into her arms. The 2 girls clung to each other, shaking and crying, as firefighters finally swarmed the corridor. "We need to get out now!" shouted one of the firefighters, already lifting Claire from the floor. Richard scooped Maya into his arms, feeling her small body tremble. The girl still clutched her mother's necklace, that last link to a love lost too soon. As they were carried out of the burning mansion, Maya whispered something so low only Claire could hear. "It's over. It's finally over." But as everyone there and knew some things never truly end. Some wounds need more than time to heal. They need love, understanding, a new chance to believe that not all families are made of pain. The morning arrived cold and grey at the city hospital. In the pediatric wing corridor, Richard watched through the glass door as Claire and Maya slept in bed side by side, their hands still linked even in sleep. His daughter's face was smudged with soot, but there was a serenity there he hadn't seen in years. Helen sat in a chair in the corner of the room, refusing to leave the girls, despite her own bandaged arm and the minor burns she had sustained. Joe had been admitted to another room, but the doctors assured them he would make a full recovery. "Mr. Caldwell?" Richard turned to find a middle-aged man in a worn trench coat. It was Charles, the private investigator he had called hours before. "Did they find the body?" Richard asked, his voice hoarse from the smoke he'd inhaled. Charles nodded gravely. "In the rubble of what's left of the second floor. But that's not all. Based on the information Maya gave about where—" He hesitated, glancing at the sleeping girls. "About where her mother was, the police just found Anna Miller's remains." Richard closed his eyes, feeling the weight of that information. She was right then. All this time. It was a shallow grave near that abandoned industrial area. Charles continued in a low voice. "The necklace the girl kept will be crucial for official identification, but the other belongings found at the site leave no doubt." Inside the room, Maya stirred restlessly in her sleep, murmuring something inaudible. Claire, even asleep, squeezed her hand tighter, and the smaller girl relaxed again. "What happens to her now?" Richard asked, his heart clenching at the thought of Maya being taken to some impersonal shelter. "Well," Charles cleared his throat, pulling some papers from the inside pocket of his trench coat. "I found something interesting among Anna Miller's belongings. A letter addressed to a social worker. She was trying to get protection, documenting the abuse, and more importantly," he held out a particularly yellowed paper. "She had a will." Richard took the paper with trembling hands. It was simple, handwritten, but properly notarized. In it, Anna designated her best friend from high school, Martha Hayes, as Maya's legal guardian should anything happen to her. "Were you able to locate this Martha?" Richard asked, a lump forming in his throat. The investigator lowered his eyes. "She passed away 2 years ago. Cancer." Richard looked back at the girls through the glass. Maya had lost everything, her mother, her last chance at family through her mother's friend. And yet, that child had found the strength not only to survive, but to help his own daughter rediscover the will to live. "There's an alternative," Charles said, pulling more papers from his coat. "Since there are no other living relatives and the designated guardian is deceased, it's possible to file a petition for adoption," Richard completed, his voice barely a whisper. In the room, Helen looked up, meeting Richard's gaze through the glass. On her face was an expression he had never seen before, a mixture of approval and hope. A nurse hurried down the hallway, causing Richard to step aside. The movement made his ribs ache, a reminder of the fight with Robert that would likely stay with him for a few weeks. But the physical pain was insignificant compared to the pain he saw in Maya's eyes every time she woke startled, frantically searching for Claire, or the fear that still made her voice tremble when she heard heavier. No footsteps in the hall. "It won't be easy," Charles warned. "She'll need a lot of psychological support, time to process everything that happened. And there's the legal matter of the investigation into her mother's death." "Nothing worth having comes easy," Richard replied, remembering the words Beatrice used to say. "And this girl has faced far too much hardship alone already." Inside the room, Maya slowly opened her eyes. For a moment, the familiar panic began to rise in her throat as she didn't recognize where she was. But then she felt Claire's hand in hers, saw Helen smiling gently from the corner of the room, and something different happened. For the first time in many months, Maya didn't feel afraid upon waking. Instead, she felt something she had forgotten existed: hope. Richard watched as Claire woke too, the two girls immediately seeking each other out with their eyes, confirming they weren't alone, that it hadn't just been a dream. "Draw up the papers," he told Charles, his voice firm. "Every child deserves a home, and every family deserves a second chance." 3 days had passed since the fire at the estate. Richard had rented a temporary house not far from the hospital, where Claire and Maya were released after undergoing various tests. Helen, still with her arm bandaged, had insisted on continuing to care for the girls, now with a dedication that went far beyond professional obligations. That morning, the house was especially quiet. Maya sat in the small backyard, staring intently at her mother's necklace, now cleaned and stored in a small velvet box Richard had bought specially for her. Claire, in her wheelchair, approached slowly. "Want to talk?" she asked softly. Maya looked up, her eyes red from crying during the night. They're holding her funeral tomorrow," she whispered. "After looking for so long now it's real. She's really not coming back." Claire moved her chair closer, taking her friend's hand. Since the fire, her movements felt different. The doctors couldn't explain it, but something had changed that night. Small spasms in her legs, heightened sensitivity, as if the desperation to save Maya had awakened something dormant in her body. In the kitchen, Helen prepared lunch while watching the girls through the window. Her hands trembled slightly as she chopped vegetables, not from the pain of her burns, but from the memories that kept flooding back. "They're going to be okay," Richard's voice sounded gently behind her. "All of you will." Helen turned, silent tears streaming down her face. "Do you know what Maya asked me last night? If I thought her mum would be mad that she started calling me Aunt Helen." Richard felt his throat tighten. Since the fire, the barriers between employer and employees had completely dissolved. Helen and Joe, who was still recovering in the hospital, had become much more than staff. They were family. In the yard, Maya opened the velvet box again. "Sometimes," she said, her voice trembling, "I dream about her. Not about that night, but about before, when she sang me to sleep or when we planned our escape." Claire felt her own tears begin to fall. "I dream about my mum too," she confessed. "But now the dreams are different because you taught me we don't have to pretend to be strong alone." Maya closed the box gently, as if storing not just the necklace, but all the precious memories of her mother. "Your dad, he said he wants to adopt me, that he wants me to be part of the family for real. And what do you think about that?" Claire asked softly. "I'm scared," Maya admitted, her voice almost a whisper. "What if I'm not good enough? What if he changes his mind? What if you finally get the chance to just be a kid?" Claire interrupted, squeezing her friend's hand. "To have a family that loves you just the way you are." In the kitchen, Richard and Helen listened to the conversation in silence. The businessman thought of Beatrice, how she would have loved Maya instantly, how she always said that love multiplies, never divides. Joe had called from the hospital earlier, asking about the girls. Even weakened, his first concern was whether Maya was sleeping well, whether Claire was doing her physical therapy exercises. The gardener, with his simplicity and kindness, had become the grandfather neither girl had truly had. "The social worker is coming today," Richard commented, helping Helen with the vegetables, "to do the initial home study for the adoption process." Helen nodded, wiping her tears with the sleeve of her blouse. "Maya needs therapy," she said. "Claire too, actually, we all do." "I've already arranged it," Richard replied. "Dr. Martinez will start seeing all of us this week, here at the house, so the girls feel safer." In the yard, a bird landed near the girls, catching their attention. It was small and appeared injured, yet it still sang. "Look at that," Claire said, smiling. "Even hurt, it can still sing." Maya watched the bird for a long moment. "Like us," she murmured. "Finally, hurt, but not broken." The two girls sat in silence, watching the little bird. And in that simple moment, something began to heal in their wounded hearts. Because sometimes healing starts like this, with small moments of beauty amidst the pain, with joined hands that promise not to let go, with families we choose and that choose us back. A week after Anna Miller's funeral, life in the Caldwell's temporary house found its own rhythm. Mornings began with Helen preparing breakfast while the girls did their exercises, Claire with her increasingly promising physical therapy, and Maya learning breathing techniques to manage her panic attacks. On that particular morning, something different happened. Claire, during her physical therapy session, managed to wiggle her toes consciously for the first time since the accident. The cry of joy she let out brought everyone running into the living room. "Look!" she exclaimed, tears of happiness streaming down her face as her toes moved slightly. "I can feel it! I can move them!" Maya was the first to hug her, followed by Helen, who couldn't hold back her tears. Richard watched the scene leaning against the doorframe, his heart so full it barely fit in his chest. Dr. Martinez said it was the trauma, the physical therapist explained, smiling. Sometimes a severe emotional shock can unlock nerve pathways that were just dormant. What you did that night, Claire, trying to save your friend, it was like your whole body screamed, "Wake up!" Maya held Claire's hand tightly. "See," she whispered, "you were stronger than you thought too." Later, during their joint therapy session with Dr. Martinez, Maya finally managed to talk about her mother's funeral. "It was different than I imagined," she said, nervously fiddling with the hem of her new shirt, one of many Richard had bought for her. "I thought it would hurt more. But having everyone there, Helen, Joe in a wheelchair insisting on coming even, though he was still admitted, Claire, Uncle Richard." She hesitated at the new title, still getting used to it. It felt like Mom could finally rest in peace. Dr. Martinez smiled gently. "And how do you feel about that?" Maya looked down at her mother's necklace, which she now wore around her neck. "It still hurts. I think it always will a little. But it's different now. Before, it was a pain that hurt inside, that wouldn't let me breathe. Now it's more like missing her." Claire, sitting beside her, took her hand. Since the fire, it was as if the two couldn't go long without that physical contact, that constant reassurance that they weren't alone. In the kitchen, Helen prepared lunch while listening to the conversation through the slightly open door. Her own therapy sessions were helping her understand why she had built so many walls around herself after her daughter's death. And more importantly, they were helping her tear down those walls, one by one. Richard entered the kitchen carrying some folders. "The judge approved temporary custody," he announced quietly, "and the renovations on the estate should be finished in 2 weeks. But," he hesitated, "I don't know if we should go back there." Helen stopped chopping vegetables. "Because of the memories, yes, not just the fire, but everything. Maybe it's time for a completely fresh start. A new house, without ghosts." From the other room, Maya's voice rose slightly. "I dreamed about her again last night, but this time she was smiling. She said she was proud of me." "And do you believe that?" the therapist asked softly. There was a moment of silence before Maya answered, "Yes, because she always said that being strong isn't about not being afraid. It's about keeping going even when you are afraid. And, her voice trembled slightly, and because now I understand, she never abandoned me. She fought for me until the very end. Claire let out a small sob. Like my mum fought for me that night, she said. Sometimes I feel guilty for starting to be happy again. Don't, Maya replied with wisdom beyond her years. Our mums didn't give their lives for us to be sad forever. They gave their lives so we could live. In the kitchen, Richard and Helen looked at each other, both with tears in their eyes. The pain was still there in all of them. The scars, both physical and emotional, were still forming. But there was also something new growing, something that felt a lot like hope. You know, Helen said, returning to chopping vegetables to hide her emotion, they say the strongest plants grow in scorched earth. Richard looked out the kitchen window, where a small garden was beginning to take shape, a joint project between Joe, who visited whenever he could, and the girls. In the center, a rosebud fought to grow. Yeah, he replied softly. I think they do. 6 months passed. Autumn had returned, painting the trees in shades of red and gold. In the Caldwells' new house, a cozy structure with a huge garden designed by Joe, the first rays of sun streamed through the window of the room Claire and Maya now shared as sisters. Maya woke first, as usual. Her nightmares had lessened considerably in recent months, but there were still nights she needed to get up just to confirm it was all real, that she was truly safe, that she had a real family. On those occasions, she found comfort watching her sister sleep. Claire stirred in the bed beside her, her toes wiggling under the blanket, a habit she'd developed since regaining movement in her legs. She still couldn't walk without support, but every small progress was celebrated as a major victory. Morning, Claire murmured, opening her eyes sleepily. What time is it? Time to get ready, Maya replied, a nervous smile on her face. Today's the day? The two looked at each other, the same mixture of anxiety and anticipation in their eyes. It was the day of the final adoption hearing, when Maya would officially become a Caldwell. Helen entered the room, carrying 2 breakfast trays. Since moving into the new house, she had transformed her role from housekeeper to something much deeper. She was now a sort of mother to both girls. Ready for the big day? She asked, placing the trays on the nightstands. Her arm, fully recovered, now bore a small tattoo, a flower growing from a crack, symbolizing her own healing journey. Downstairs, Richard adjusted his tie in front of the mirror, his hands trembling slightly. Joe, who now lived in a small guest house on the property, watched his friend with an understanding smile. They're already a family, the gardener said softly. The judge is just making official what the heart already knows. Richard nodded, unable to speak. He had spent hours over the last week organizing all the necessary documents, fearing something might go wrong at the last minute. But deep down, he knew Joe was right. They were already a family, bound not by blood but by something much stronger. When everyone was ready, they gathered in the living room. Claire, wearing a light blue dress, managed a few steps leaning on her crutches, a feat she made a point of showing off on special occasions. Maya, in a green dress that matched her eyes, nervously touched her mother's necklace. She'd be proud, Claire said, noticing her sister's gesture. Our mums, both of them, they'd be proud of how strong we are together. In the courthouse, the judge smiled as the family entered. She had followed the case from the beginning and witnessed the extraordinary transformation in all of them. When it was time for Maya to sign the papers, her small hands trembled, so much she could barely hold the pen. It's okay, Claire whispered, holding her free hand. You're already my sister. This is just so the rest of the world knows it too. After the ceremony, they returned home where a small celebration awaited. Them. The garden was decorated with lights and flowers, Joe's handiwork, having transformed the space into a true paradise over the months. Dr. Martinez was there, along with a few close friends who had become a vital part of the family's support network. Late in the afternoon, as everyone talked and laughed, Maya quietly slipped away to a corner of the garden. There, near a small bench, was a special flower bed with 2 rose bushes, one planted in memory of Anna, the other in memory of Beatrice. Claire found her there, her steps steadier each day. Want to be alone? Maya shook her head, reaching out a hand to her sister. No, I never want to be alone again. The two sat on the bench, watching the sunset paint the sky pink and gold. Around Maya's neck, her mother's necklace glowed softly, no longer a symbol of loss, but a reminder of eternal love. You know what I've learned? Maya said, breaking the silence. That sometimes life hurts so much, you think you'll never be able to breathe right again. But then you find people who help you breathe again, who show you that family isn't about who gave birth to you, but about who chooses to stand by you every single day. Claire hugged her sister, silent tears streaming down her face. And sometimes, she added, you have to break completely to find out you can be put back together even more beautifully. Across the garden, Richard watched his daughters, his heart overflowing. Helen approached, offering him a handkerchief, which he accepted with a grateful smile. They're going to be okay, Helen said softly. We all are. And there in that garden full of flowers that grew in once scorched earth, a family rebuilt from ashes celebrated not just an official adoption, but the victory of love over fear, hope over despair, light over shadows. Because sometimes the most beautiful stories aren't the ones that begin with once upon a time, but those that end with, and then we learn to live again.